Hi everyone, it's William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri 1917 Diary series, but I say that with qualifications because I'm doing something a little experimental today, and that is to go beyond Dmitri's diaries and look at something that was vitally important to him, and that is important to know about in order to continue following what he has to say in his diaries in this long 1917, November 1917 diary entry. 17th November 1917 is what I was trying to say. So I thought I would dedicate a whole video to a famous speech that was given in the Duma on the 14th of November 1916, around the time that the Rasputin conspiracy, the conspiracy to assassinate Rasputin, came into being. And this speech was absolutely crucial to that future assassination. Well, it was at the end or the middle of December, so it wasn't that far in the future. It was something that people like Dmitri and Yusupov were hanging on every word, although I don't believe they were present in the Duma. Dmitri definitely wasn't. Yusupov might have been. I think he did attend some Duma sessions. So there was something that was formed in 1915 called the Progressive Bloc, and it was government and military leaders who got together and wanted to turn things around in Russia. Some of them were very definitely strong monarchists. Nikolai Nikolaevich was a member of the Progressive Bloc. He was one of the leaders of the Progressive Bloc, in addition to being the supreme commander of Russia's military forces. I'm talking about Nikolasha, Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich. And when Nicholas II moved to take over at the end of the summer 1915, this was considered absolutely disastrous by the Progressive Bloc, and I think they had a strong point. So when you hear progressive, you know, you're not thinking about, or shouldn't be thinking about, people who are ultra-liberal. Nikolai Nikolaevich definitely wasn't ultra-liberal. There were certainly liberals, but they weren't revolutionaries, they weren't extremists, they weren't Mensheviks, they weren't anything like that. And they wanted very much to see Russia succeed in the war. So you had a lot of general staff officers whose main priority, whose main understanding of Russian honor was that Russia should continue to be a great power in the world. And yeah, so they were convinced that opposing them were not only extreme right-wing groups like the Black Hundreds, but the Rasputin cabal. And in their opinion, especially after Nicholas II took over as commander-in-chief and moved to headquarters, there was the idea that the Rasputin cabal was the body that was choosing who the ministers were and who the leaders of the government were. And they also believed that, rightly or wrongly, and I think largely wrongly, that the Rasputin cabal was in direct, in some instances, indirect contact with Germany, either so that they were possibly traitors, and if they weren't traitors, then they were playing right into Germany's hands, because a lot of them, or some of them, wanted a separate peace. Rasputin himself did not want the war. And, you know, I don't even think that was on political grounds. It was a peasant's point of view. Why are we doing this? Anyway, they saw that as ruinous for Russia. And they were right. It was ruinous for Russia. We know that. So when Dmitri and Felix were reading the text of this speech or listening to this speech, you know, I think it if not actually inspired the assassination, then increased their resolve, certainly. They ended up contacting two members of the Duma to see if they would participate in the assassination. And the interesting thing is that they chose one moderate liberal member of the Duma, and one extreme right-wing member of the Duma, Vladimir Purishkevich and Vasily Maklikov. Maklikov was the liberal. Purishkevich was associated with the Black Hundreds, this thuggish right-wing group. And of the two of them, only Purishkevich was willing to participate directly. Maklikov knew about the conspiracy, kept the secret, and gave them a weapon, this sort of weighted leather covered club called a Kosh, C-O-S-H, and it was indeed used to beat Rasputin. It was a very brutal murder. So that's interesting, and that, I would say, was typical of Dmitri. He liked to have both sides represented. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just read the speech verbatim. This is an English translation done by a man named Emanuel Arensberg in 1927. You can find it on the website for the History Department of Virginia Tech. That's where I got it from. All right, here we go. Keep in mind that it was a speech that just fired up society in general. Gentlemen, members of the State Duma, with a heavy heart I ascend this tribune today. You remember the circumstances under which the Duma met over a year ago, August 1st, 1915. The Duma was then suffering from the blows of our military failures. These were due to the scarcity of munitions, and for this scarcity, the Minister of War, Sukhamlinov, was responsible. You recall how at that moment the country, under the influence of the terrible peril that had become obvious to all, demanded a union of the national forces and the formation of a ministry composed of persons in whom the country had confidence. And you recall how even Minister Goromikhin at that time admitted from this very platform that the course of the war demands an immense, extraordinary spiritual and physical effort. You remember that the government then yielded. The ministers who were odious to the public were then removed before the convocation of the Duma. Sukhamlinov, whom the country regarded as a traitor, was removed. And in response to the demand of the popular representatives, Polivanov at the session of August 10th announced to us, amid general applause, as you may recall, that a commission of investigation had been appointed and a beginning made toward bringing the former Minister of War to justice. And gentlemen, the public agitation at that time was not without consequences. Our army obtained what it needed, and the nation entered upon the second year of the war with the same enthusiasm as in the first year. So I'll just pause to say that Sukhamlinov, the Minister of War, was definitely part of the Rasputin cabal, and, had spoken in favor of a separate peace. Anyway, we'll go on. He'll be relevant in the next diary entry. We'll go on from there. What a difference, gentlemen, there is now in the 27th month of the war, a difference which is especially striking to me after several months spent abroad. We are now facing new difficulties, and these difficulties are not less complex and serious, not less profound than those that confronted us in the spring of last year. The government needed heroic measures to combat the general disorganization of the national economy. We ourselves are the same as before. We, in the 27th month of the war, are the same as we were in the 10th and in the first month. As heretofore, we are striving for complete victory. As heretofore, we are prepared to make all the necessary sacrifices. And as heretofore, we are anxious to preserve our national unity. But I must say this candidly. There is a difference in the situation. We have lost faith in the ability of this government to achieve victory, because as far as this government is concerned, neither the attempts at correction nor the attempts at improvement which we have made here have proved successful. All the Allied powers have summoned to the support of the government the best men of all parties, all the confidence and all those organizing elements present in their countries, which are better organized than our own country. What has our own government accomplished? Our declaration has told that. When there was formed in the Fourth Duma a majority, the Progressive Bloc, which the Duma lacked before, a majority ready to vote its confidence in a cabinet worthy of such confidence, then nearly all those men who might in some slight degree have expected confidence were forced systematically, one after another, every one of them, to leave the cabinet. And if we have formerly said that our government had neither the knowledge nor the ability which were indispensable at the moment, we say now, gentlemen, that this present government has sunk beneath the level on which it stood in the normal times of Russian life, and now the gulf between us and the government has grown wider and impassable. Gentlemen, a year ago, Sukhomlinov was placed under judicial investigation. Then the hateful ministers were removed before the opening of the Duma session, but now the number of such ministers has been augmented by one. At that time, we did not appeal to the reason and the knowledge of the government, but instead to its patriotism and its conscience. Can we do so now? In the French Yellow Book, there has been published a German document in which rules are laid down for the disorganization of the enemy's country, showing how to stir up trouble and disorder. Gentlemen, if our own government wanted deliberately to set itself a task, or if the Germans wanted to employ their own means for the same purpose, the means of influencing and of bribing, they could not do better than to act as the Russian government has acted. And now, gentlemen, you have the consequences. As early as the 26th of June, 1915, I uttered a warning from this platform that the poisonous seed of suspicion is already yielding abundant fruit, and from one end of the Russian land to the other there are spreading the dark rumors of treachery and treason. I am quoting the very words which I then used. I pointed out at the time, and I am again quoting my own words, that these rumors reach high and spare none. Alas, gentlemen, that warning, like all the others, was not heeded. Consequently, we find the following statements in the declaration of the 28 presidents of provincial Zemstva boards who met at Moscow on the 11th of November of the present year. Painful, terrible suspicions, sinister rumors of treachery and treason, of occult forces fighting for the benefit of Germany and striving through the destruction of national unity and the sowing of dissension to prepare the ground for a disgraceful peace, have reached a point where it is generally felt that an enemy hand is secretly influencing the course of our state affairs. It is but natural that from such foundation there should arise the rumor that our governing circles have admitted the uselessness of further struggle, the timeliness for ending the war, and the necessity of a separate peace. Yes, gentlemen, there is a vast difference between that meeting of ours under Goromikin, which took place on the 1st of August, 1915, and even in February 1916, and the meeting taking place today. These meetings are just as different as is the general condition of the country. At that time, we could talk about organizing the country with the help of Duma legislation. Had we then been given the opportunity to carry through the laws which we had planned and prepared for passage, including the law on the Wolists, Russia would not now be so helpless in the face of the food supply problem. That was the situation then. But now, gentlemen, the problem of legislation has been shifted to the background. Today we see and understand with this government we cannot legislate any more than we can with this government lead Russia to victory. Formerly, we tried to prove that it was impossible to start a fight against all the vital forces of the nation, that it was impossible to carry on warfare within the country when there was war at the front, that it was necessary to utilize the popular enthusiasm for the achievement of national tasks, and that otherwise there could be only killing oppression, which would merely increase the very peril that they were trying to avert by such oppression. Today, gentlemen, it seems that everybody feels convinced that it is useless to go to them with proofs, useless when fear of the people, fear of their own country blinds their eyes, and when the fundamental problem has become that of hastening the end of the war, were it even without gain, merely to be freed from the necessity for seeking popular support. On the 23rd of February 1916, I concluded my speech with the statement that we no longer dared to address our appeal to the political wisdom of the government, and that I did not expect any answer from the existing cabinet to the questions which agitated us. At that time, my words appeared to some people too pessimistic, but now we go further, and perhaps those words will sound clearer and more hopeful. We are telling this government, as we told it in the declaration of the Bloc, we shall fight you. We shall fight with all legitimate means until you go. It is said that a member of the Council of Ministers, and this was correctly heard by Duma member Chahedza, on being told that the State Duma would on this occasion speak of treason, exclaimed excitedly, "I may perhaps be a fool, but I am not a traitor. Gentlemen, the predecessor of that minister was undoubtedly a clever minister, just as the predecessor of our Minister of Foreign Affairs was an honest minister. But they are no longer in cabinet. And does it matter, gentlemen, as a practical question, whether we are, in the present case, dealing with stupidity or treason, when the Duma keeps everlastingly insisting that the rear must be organized for a successful struggle, the government persists in claiming that organizing the country means organizing a revolution and deliberately prefers chaos and disorganization? Was it stupidity or treason? Furthermore, gentlemen, when the authorities, in the midst of this general discontent and irritation, deliberately set to work stirring up popular outbreaks, that is to say, when they purposely provoke unrest and outbreaks, is that being done unconsciously or consciously? We cannot therefore find much fault with the people if they arrive at conclusions such as I have read here, in the words of those representatives of provincial administrative boards. You must realize also why it is that we too have no other task left us today than the task which I have already pointed out to you, to obtain the retirement of this government. You ask, how can we start a fight when the war is on? But gentlemen, it is only in wartime that they are a menace. They are a menace to the war, and it is precisely for this reason, in time of war and in the name of war, for the sake of that very thing which induced it to unite, that we are now fighting them. Gentlemen, you understand that I can deal with no other theme today than this one. I cannot emulate Duma member Chehedza and occupy myself with our internal controversies. This is not the time for it, and I shall make no reply to his references and attacks upon me. For me, answer has been given in that declaration which we read there. We have many, very many different reasons for dissatisfaction with the government. When we have time, we shall speak of them, but all those various reasons come down to this one general reason, the incapacity of the government as at present composed. This is our main evil, the overcoming of which will be tantamount to the winning of the whole campaign. And therefore, gentlemen, for the sake of the millions of victims and the torrents of blood poured out, for the sake of the achievement of our national interests, which Sturmer does not promise us, in the name of our responsibilities to that nation which has sent us here, we shall fight on until we achieve that genuine responsibility of government which has been defined by the 3 points of our common declaration, an equal understanding by all the members of the cabinet of the immediate problems of the present, their agreement and readiness to execute the program of the majority of the State Duma, their obligation not only in the realization of this program, but throughout their activity to look to the majority of the State Duma for support. A cabinet which does not satisfy these 3 standards does not merit the confidence of the State Duma and must go. Okay, and I very stupidly forgot at the beginning of this to tell you who gave this speech. So the person who gave the speech was none other than Pavel Miliukov, who was the founder and leader of the Cadet Party, and a moderate left-wing party, socialist party, but not, they were moderates. And the interesting thing about Miliukov is that he was the man that Dmitri would turn to in 1919, at a time when Dmitri very much wanted to understand what had happened in Russia. He wanted a mentor, and Miliukov was the person that he went to. And Miliukov brushed him off a little bit and sent him instead to a professor at the London School of Economics, whom Dmitri ended up taking private lessons from. But later, in the 1930s, in the late 1930s, Miliukov himself would be full of praise for Dmitri as a champion of the anti-Nazi part of the emigration. Okay, Sturmer, who's referred to here, was another Rasputin cabal member, and he was the prime minister at that time. And I would emphasize, of course, that what is being talked about here is not the conspiracy theories that you had among the right wing about Jews and Freemasons and dark forces, supposedly, the whole conspiracy theory thing. They're talking about people wanting the separate peace. As I said, whether they were actively working for the Germans, which I don't know if any of them were, but at any rate, playing into the Germans' hands because they wanted a separate peace, and they were letting Rasputin choose members of the cabinet who were disastrous, who didn't know what they were doing. So yeah, that's what this is about, not about wild conspiracy theories. And, I certainly will say that the Empress, who was considered to be part of this German-leaning group, was not. She was wholly loyal to Russia. But those are very famous words in Russian history. Is it stupidity or is it treason? And since various people mentioned in this will be mentioned again in the next Dmitri video, and since this speech had such an important impact on Dmitri and Yusupov and all of those in Russia at that time who were horrified by what was going on with the government, I thought, it's a good one to put out there in an English translation. So that's what I did. And if you watched it, thank you very much for that. And come back for the next diary installment. Bye.